Off. There we go. Hi guys. Look, it's been an adventurous year. There's three of us here. There's myself and there's the two Daves who were up on the Pluto occultation, and I tragically was not around last week to listen to Dave talking about it. But it was a thoroughly interesting time. The occultation itself was of course good fun, but we've done loads of those. I mean, we the amateur community have done dozens and dozens and dozens of occultations, and that wasn't necessarily the hard bit. But actually working with the professional community who provide us for a lot of these campaigns and provide us with and seeing their techniques, it was actually quite heartening to see how similar their techniques were to ours. So we're obviously going in the right direction, which is excellent news. Bill, I can see you up there. Are you give me a thumbs up if you can make it? Are you coming across? Do you know yet or not? We need Bill back in Australia. Even if it's just for a few weeks. So that what I'm talking about tonight and is really some experimentation I've got now. Let's have a bit of audience participation. So down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a thing called reactions. All right, I want everyone to have a look at that reactions button. It doesn't matter what you press. If you are using 8-bit video technology exclusively for your occultations, give me a reaction. It can be a boo or a hiss or a love or a or a clap, and we'll have a quick look through. I've got two screens. Awesome. And unsurprisingly, a lot of us we've grown up with video cameras. They've been absolutely awesome and they've done marvelous things. So similarly on the reactions, who's moved over to using purely the modern CMOS type cameras like the QHY10, the QHY174 GPS, which is oh cool. We're getting a few thumbs up, which is awesome. These are, I mean, I've never played with one before. I'm going to actually get into what I'm going to be talking about and share my screen and talk about my adventures with my ASI 174, which is the same chip, but in the I didn't spend so much money format, and probably should have bought the QHY but didn't. So let's share my screen. I'll share the whole thing, so there might be some feedback initially, and then I shall get going. There we go. Cool. So it actually kicked off 2018. Actually, I'd thought about buying a camera, and I ended up buying the 174 because it's a kind of a planetary camera. And then I heard about the fact that it was being used. It had a QHY GPS version that was used for occultation timing by the professional observers. I thought, well, hang on a second, it can't be too shabby if it's doing that. So I turned my hand to using it in occultation timing. Now I was a little bit, it's not a GPS thing. I had to use NTP for timing. I was a little bit reluctant to use it for asteroidals because of the timing. So I thought, well, what's important, or what can I do which is really useful for relative timing? So I thought, well, hang on, lunar occultations. The absolute timing is important if you want to see where things have been moving about. But actually, if you're looking for double stars and looking for double star discoveries, lunar occultations are great because you're actually really interested in the time between frames, and that's accurately measured with these devices. And I've been involved in double star work before, the AAQ, the Astronomical Association of Queensland, of which I was a member. We did some visual results, visual surveys, and it was really good fun just using telescopes, just trying to split double stars, not in a pretty way, but in a way. So you'd see a tiny little bit of separation, and that was enough. Now, I was the winner because I got a 20-inch Dobsonian, and the size really does matter. And if you've got a big telescope, you can split little stars. It's about half an arc second. Not beautifully, but as I say, you can see that it's elongated. And we had this, you know, this, on the slide, this unsplittable area with a 4-inch telescope in this paper, saying, look, anything down 1 arc second with a 4-inch telescope, you can forget it, particularly when there's a high magnitude difference between them. So with that in mind, and with work that this group has done on going through the back catalogue of double stars, which people have put their hand up. So you've got the visual observers that have said, yep, that was a double, that was a double. And we went through and cleaned it. We went through, and all of those stars, we gradually one by one cleaned it using electronic methods, and it was a fascinating process. So maybe Steve can remember how many of the catalogue, or Murray or somebody can remember how many of the catalogue we actually verified, and how many. I think the result was pretty much that every star that people had put their hands up visually whilst observing and said it was a double star wasn't. It was just a enthusiasm of the moment type thing. We might have just confirmed 1 or 2, but you know, if you put your hand up every time, one of them is bound to be right eventually. You know, so anyway, so then we've got this where we are now, largely with this humble security camera. It's been pressed into service for many years. It's done us great things. And, you know, a lot of us have discovered double star using this, pressing it into service. It's not high res, it's good old humble 40 millisecond or 20 millisecond fields. Slightly different, of course, for our North American observers using NTSC, but it's still been a useful tool. And I just thought I'd start off by showing this little discovery. It was Dave Galt and I think, we'll see the next slide. And it's a little double star. You can see the jitter and the light curve that we're also very used to. But I think more importantly, if I run that again, you should also be able to see the double star. I mean, that's the advantage of video. You can replay it as many times until you can see what you can see. If you're out there on a freezing cold night at the eyepiece, that little thing there that you can quite clearly see in the video. Did I see it? Did I not? Did I not? Did I see it? So there's the data in the database. And all of a sudden you get to see this cluster of things. So there's all 3 of us are on tonight. You got the 2 Galts, the 2 Bradshaws, and the two Kerrs, who Steve got that double star a couple of years later. But before that, oh, there's another one. There's Dave Harold. Dave didn't catch one earlier on. And there's Peter Anderson, another Queenslander, who didn't catch anything earlier on. So from 1942 to 1998, all visual observations, nothing had been seen. We come up with a camera, and guess what? We find something. But then I suddenly spot a couple of names in there, D. Evans and R.E. Nather, and I'm thinking, why did I know those? Why do I know those names? And I just realized I've been reading loads of papers on occultation research. And in looking at it, there those names reversed, R.E. Nather and David S. Evans, back in 1980. Let's hang on. So back in 79, doing, guess what? Exactly what I'm doing today. Okay, so it's nothing new about the stuff I'm talking to tonight. They've got a 36-inch scope and a wacko great box of electronic trickery on the back. And they're observing at some rate of knots occultations of stars and seeing what comes about. And the question is, why didn't I see it? Well, I suspect that in the X years between our discovery and their thing, it had actually moved from out behind of its parent star. You know, it's not that the previous observers weren't capable of seeing a double star in occultation. It's just that the star wasn't double at that particular time. So this goes show technology moves on. So this is a technology that I'm going to be talking about. This is the next generation of those security cameras. In this particular case, it's a ASI 174, but the only available version with GPS time insertion is the QHY 174. And they're brilliant cameras. I reckon I just go out and buy one. Maybe not this, go and buy the QHY version with the GPS in it. But they're bought by the bucket loads by the professional community. Mark Bowie was telling me that he bought 70 odd of them over the years, and actually QHY will put this technology into any of their range of cameras. Their GPS technology can be added to any of their range of cameras. So as this camera becomes, you know, aged and less loved, you know, we can put them into more sensitive cameras. It's got a 77% quantum efficiency, very, very low read noise. It's very much used for the planetary imaging community. They're a little bit different to use than normal cameras, as in video cameras. And I'm just going to escape from this and maximize this particular screen. So I happen to have that camera just with a normal telephoto lens sat there, looking across the room. Hopefully you can see that. It's my DVD collection. Remember those things? They're actually more archaic than any of the technology I have in the house now. I don't think I've actually stuck one of those things in a player in many years now with Netflix, and it's running at 1 millisecond exposure, so it's 1,000 frames per second, and it looks pretty dark. It's at, you know, we've got a gain setting. I'm going to change that to 300 for a reason. 300 is the standard gain setting for this particular camera used by the professional astronomers, and the reason of that is it does drop the bit depth. It's a 12-bit camera, and it drops it down to 10 bits by then, but it's still got plenty of good signal to be able to see what is going on. The thing which is different about a video camera and one of these CMOS cameras, or even the old CCD cameras, is that a video camera actually distorts the signal before it's sent out. It actually stretches it and applies gamma correction to it before it actually sends it out. Whereas these cameras don't. You record in raw format. So that post-processing, you can make some manipulations. So if you can have a look at this display stretch here, I've actually stretched it so you can see what's going on. If I was to go back and reset it, you can't see anything. You know, if you're an imager, you're used to looking at blank bits of video. It's not that the video isn't being captured, and it's not that it's not good video. It's just that you need, in post-production, to actually deploy those settings. So it's quite a different way of thinking about how to take data. Now, if I was to do a record, and I'll do that, I'm going to do a quick capture of 1,000 frames, and away it goes. You might be able to see, depends on how good this resolution is coming through in the the bottom left-hand corner, it's recording at 66 frames per second. And it's finished now. It's come up. It says, right, at the top band, I've recorded 1,000 frames at 65.6 frames per second. It's done its very bestest. Now, that's cool. But the trick about these cameras, particularly for what we do in high resolution observing, we want to use a thing called region of interest. So I can cut it down. I'll just close this. There we go. You see that tiny little aperture at the top now. So instead of recording all of the space around the object, as in the star, I'm just going to record the star. That's the only thing I'm interested in on the lunar occultation. I'm not interested in anything else. So I can do the same thing again. I can do a quick capture. And all of a sudden, it's not running at 60 frames per second. It's recorded that lot at 887 frames per second, because it's throwing data to the hard disk. So it's throwing that data straight to the hard disk, and
how do you spell like that?
There's a little bit of noise interference. Oh, there's Renato in. That's right, Renato, check your mic off.
Hi everyone.
It's all right. I'll just escape out of that and get back to the presentation. I might have to run quick. How long ago? I'm chunking up time as we go. So there we go. So all of a sudden, and this is that region of interest with a star involved, a double star involved, in relation to a standard AVI screen. So you can see that it's capturing a tiny amount of data, and it's allowing us to do it really quickly. So it's allowing us to do 1,000 frames per second. And here's just a little video of that frame and a water drop. We've seen them on nature programs. We love these things. Well, the cameras that we can buy off the shelf, these 174 cameras, can record at amazing frame rates. Now, what we need, and I'll move on from that. So there we go. There's pointing it at our beloved IOTA VTI, 1 pulse per second at 1,000 frames per second. So I can confirm, you guys, that light is on for 20 milliseconds, because there it is. There's 20 odd frames taken at that. I did a lot of that because I wanted to confirm what my NTP timing was like. So it's not quite there. It was usually give or take 5 milliseconds using NTP timing from home. So this is an issue, and why, if you're going to buy one, you'd probably buy the QHY version with the GPS inserted. That has its issue as a call, because you have to wait for 20 minutes for the almanac to update, but still you're going to get accurate timing. I've mentioned this all better. It's 12-bit up to 179 gain and 10-bit up to 300 gain, which gives you loads and loads of data to work with, and really low read noise and excellent for post-processing. Just a one from the Pluto X-SPED. In the center, there's 2 stars. The one on the left is the target star. This is real data just before the event. And you can see this bright line at the very, very top. That's actually how the QHY GPS stores its timing signal. It's actually tucked away in the top of the data. Now, the downside of that, it needs the same amount of data all of the time. And if you shrink that, more of the signal or more of the image is taken up by the timing signal. So when you go down to the tiny apertures, it's all timing signal and no actual star field. So we do have to be a little bit careful using that camera. So what we're going to look at, Dave Herald, thank you very much for the XZ catalog of zodiacal stars. It's been in service for some time. It's got, what was it, 2,404 plenty of stars to look at. We're not interested in all of them. I'm only interested, and Renato, who's online, my partner in crime in Brisbane, we're interested in those stars which are 8th magnitude and below. So there's 5,000 of them. The 585 stars at 6th magnitude and below are absolutely awesome as well. Now, some of those are coming into, Steve mentioned those asteroids, the brighter asteroids, they're getting into that area as well. And when are we looking at it? If we're going to do high resolution lunar occultations, well, if you're working for a living, then you've got days 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and maybe 10, where you've got plenty of time to see those brighter stars on the limb. After that, it really gets washed out a bit, so you don't bother. If you're a retiree and you love early morning, then you've got 19 to 25 that you can actually look for these results. But they are reappearances, and using tiny apertures, much, much more difficult. Okay. And so normally we don't worry too much about Fresnel diffraction, but when you're operating at speeds of 1,000 frames per second and more, you do. So as I'm sure we possibly all know, or are possibly Googling up right at this very moment, there are diffraction rings around the edges caused by the fact that light operates as a wave. I'm choosing vanilla, just white light. It's less subtle, but you can see it. That's only because I don't have a filter on my telescope. And then this is what happens. These are old papers. These are 80s, 70s, 80s papers, by the way. So it's something that was researched a long time ago, and it's now 2022. This is old data. In fact, 1978, when my car, a 1978 MGB. So that's 42 years ago. But this is real data that I'm taking. So there's a lunar occultation of a bright star at about 1,000 frames per second that absolutely matches that Fresnel pattern. Okay, and there we go. That's a little bit of photoshopping to show that at 1,000 frames per second you can actually see that data. You can see those curves, and if you do one, you do another, because the first thing you do is you prove that your technology is working. And these are various curves at around 500 to 1,000 frames per second. Now, the real fun stuff is the fact that we want to discover stuff. It's not enough measuring bits and pieces. We actually want to find new stuff. And again, there's those two people, Nather and Evans. It's the same paper from 1978, looking at the interaction of Fresnel curves on double star lunar occultations of double stars, using that 36-inch telescope. And what's really interesting, if you read the paper, is looking at the separation vectors. Now, I think Dave Harold after this is going to talk about separation vectors as well. So in this one, is it 0.0061 arc second separation vectors, 0.025. These are tiny numbers. These are absolutely tiny numbers. And here's some data we've got where we've actually got jitters, I like to call them, in the data. There's a 10 millisecond perturbation of the Fresnel curve. And there's an 8 millisecond perturbation of the Fresnel curve, and another 5 millisecond jitter sat in the data. So this is the BL baseline, and it's good that Renato's here because he's the L at 0 down in Algester, and I'm the B Bradshaw up in Samford, and we're 32.6 kilometers apart. Now, normally that's too close to do anything interesting or to see separations in double stars. But a couple of years ago, actually, when was this? 2019. This is going back a bit now. 13 Libra, which is actually a giant star. We both recorded it at the same time on the same night, and got the same result, of course, except it was slightly different. So mine is the top with a 4 millisecond 4 millisecond event, and Renato's is the bottom one with a 6 millisecond event, tucked away in the Fresnel diffraction. These are whatever caused that is incredibly close to that star. What's also interesting is neither of those curves are particularly clean or straight, but they do actually match. so I think somebody's going to have to explain to me why the general nature of that curve over that, it's only about a second or two, they match so closely. I'd like to see if there are, you know, lunar limb reasons for that or not. So there's good data to be had, and what I'm doing is encouraging guys with these cameras to go out and experiment, and go out and spend some time taking data of lunar occultations. And what we notice, that's a bit of a rubbish bit of photoshopping, is that there's an example of that interaction. So if you put the two curves interacting over one another with a bit of photoshopping, you can see that the dip in the lower curve is actually cancelling out the actual peak in the higher curve. So, you know, everything's kind of holding together. We don't have any, well, I certainly don't have the smarts or the software to do the fine analysis of that data at the moment. It's very much just gathering and sharing and talking about. But it's fascinating, and I hope you guys can do it because the technology allows us to. Now the last thing, and this is just going to take a couple of minutes, so I come back in on time, I think. One of the things we were talking about in Darwin, and I was showing this data to the, as I say, the professional astronomers from the Southwest Research Institute, and they weren't massively interested in the double star discovery bit, but what they were interested in, well, they said, oh, does that mean you can actually measure the angular diameter of the star? And I said, I don't really know, because I never thought about that before. It's not something I'd looked at. So here's part 3, and there's a little slide of the fact that the average star is a milliarc second, but some are bigger. And we're looking at brighter stars, we're looking at giants. And the answer is, yes, you can measure it. You can actually measure, and again, it's not new, new research, it's old research that documents how to measure the angular diameter of a star through its Fresnel diffraction curve. And the scientists, the actual professional community, are interested in this. So maybe this is a project to look at. Now, I'll just bring that original slide back of the fact that I've been doing everything in white light, and demonstrating there how the curve in white light is somewhat deteriorated from monochromatic light. Now that one's at 4,500 angstroms, but this particular camera is very sensitive in green light. It might be that for stellar diameter measurements on bright lunar occultations of stars, we have to I need to chuck a green filter over to see if we can improve that. And I'll go back to that slide, because you can see that CE Tauri there just looks like the curve from monochromatic, from our white light view. So there's a little bit of work. The data I've collected so far probably isn't massively useful for this, but I don't know. The data that I should be collecting in the future, once I've bought myself a 2-inch green filter and stick that on the front, might be actually able to look at the actual stellar diameters. And as I say, the professional community do appear to be interested in that. So there's another way that perhaps we can all, and you know, everyone knows the film. I'm going to leave you on that cliffhanger. Can we, between now and TTSO 17, actually start measuring those diameters and pass them back into the professional communities? Cool. Did I do it? Just about. I shall I shall stop there to keep you back on track.
Thank you, Jonathan. As long as you can organise for the clouds to disappear, yep, I'm in.
Yes, I'm sorry about that bit.
Just how narrow a filter you think you're going to need to go? Because obviously you're cutting out light and you're not going to be able to do the frame rates.
Yeah.
If you throw away half the photons.
Well, here's another method. It's another sideways method. So in Pluto, I managed to get a guy from the occultation, the Ice in Space, the Australian Astronomy Forum, who happened to be living in Darwin, and he took some data for the Pluto event. He actually did a really good job of it, despite difficult conditions, and got a beautiful curve, including a central splash. And he had a color camera, and that's all he had. And I'd even called it it's like a better than nothing kind of a result, but actually was really good data. And it turns out modern color cameras are much more sensitive than they ever used to be. You can actually take really good occultation data with a color camera, and funnily enough, that a color camera has its Bayer matrix has 2 green channels, 1 red and 1 blue. On these brighter events, you might actually be able to use a color camera and take very powerful data set out of it, because you can de-Bayer them. And you can actually effectively get 3 bandwidths out of 1 camera. I don't know. It just hasn't been done. Nobody's been looking in this direction. So this is why I wanted to bring it to you guys to say, look, this is a really good opportunity to experiment with your cameras. And what are you going to do on a moonlit night? You've got a rubbishy object in the way, and if a bright star happens to be occulting it, then go out and take your camera and record the event at as fast a speed as you possibly can, and just see what happens. It's really interesting, and if we can all bring those data sets together, we might actually start pushing this along a bit.
Yeah, from my understanding, with my wife who's been working up at Stromlo with stuff, the issue of stellar diameters is quite important to the professionals for calibrating a raft of things. The thing that needs to be developed for us is to get what you need out of the Fresnel diffraction. You need to be able to deconvolute the diffraction pattern to extract whatever's doing whatever behind it. And that includes, if you go back to the very early stuff with star diameters, which was occultations of Aldebaran and Antares, and you've got to seriously deal with limb darkening and potentially large spots. There's a lot to be done. High time resolution, very good. There's a field of activity there for us all. But if we're going to go down that path, we also need to have a pathway for making our results available. It's one thing to take a light curve and say, oh, isn't this fantastic? I'm achieving great things. But if it's staying in your room and doing nothing else, then you've achieved nothing.
No, I agree.
So there's a fair bit of work on the computational side, and then putting together a pathway for publishing the data.
No, I think so. Renato and I have done the easy bit. We've just gathered a bucket load of the stuff.
Yep.
There's a few things there in the chat, Jonathan, if you have a look. I like the idea of Murray putting the star analyzer in there. I'll give that one a go too.
Yeah, you've got non-cooled yet. Actually, the cooled versions, just to your question, Steve, they're not available via ASI. The only method is to go to the QHY camera. But that's not necessarily a terrible thing. The reason that they're not available is because they have such good thermal characteristics that they don't have dreadful thermal noise.
Yeah, I
So
tend
they
to try
can-
to use mine for other things, the long exposures, and the hot pixels kill me. But at those frame rates, who
Yeah.
cares?
So at fast frame rates, they and they are planetary cameras. Usually, they don't they don't have, you know, an issue, a significant issue. Yeah, unity gain absolutely 4E, which is pretty impressive. Okay. Terry, I don't know what's happening with your issue. Terry, is talk about usable data from your QHY GPS. Is that simply because, well, what's the sort of problem you're coming up with? Is that a understanding the software, or is there a physical character problem with the camera? Oh, fair enough. If you want
Yeah,
to
I
reach
just
out
realized
anytime.
I can turn the microphone on and talk instead of
Yes,
typing
yeah,
in a
much easier.
keyboard. Makes it so much easier. No, I haven't put enough time into it. I tried to do one event in January. I geared up for that very, very quickly. It was a very faint event, low on the horizon, and I missed it. And then I set it aside and I worked on other projects. But now I've got the observatory built, the pier is established. The LX 200R is permanently mounted, and I mounted that camera for the first time 5 days ago. Now I'm waiting for clear skies and time to just sit out there and practice and get used to it. I haven't used Sharp Cap but once, and there's the tools I just need to become familiar with.
Oh, well, if ever you need to have a Sharp Cap demo, happy to run through it. We can Zoom at any time. Just reach out and we'll make it happen.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So and Oliver on bit depth. Let's see if I can quickly. Actually, I won't shut up. But basically, when you turn up the gain on these cameras, you reduce the well depth. Okay, so it starts off with 32K well depth, this particular camera. And as you crank it up, the wells get combined. There's a thing called unity gain where one photon turns into one electron. And that happens with this particular camera at a gain of 179, allegedly. It's around that figure. It says 189 in the manual, but it's not right. And at that point, the camera is still operating at 12 bits. So you're getting the most out of the camera at 179 gain. You know, that comes as a bit of a shock to think you do better at 0, but actually 179 is as good as it's going to get. Once you go above that, you start to reduce the number of wells capable for the camera capable of creating. So once you get to 300 gain, the well drops down to about 1,000 and something, which equates to 10 bits. So there we go. And the professional community are really happy to. They just standardize on 10-bit data at 300 gain, and it's not a bad place to be. It seems to work for them. If you want it to be, if it's a bright star though, you go the opposite direction. You just, you know, it doesn't make any difference. If you're looking at a 6th magnitude star, then you can turn the gain right back down again, because you're just gonna blow it out even at 1 millisecond or half a millisecond exposure. Hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. If there's any more questions for Jonathan. Okay, Murray, might press stop.